Welcome to another episode of Edible RX, the podcast that teaches autoimmune warriors to use anti-inflammatory food as medicine. I'm Laura Rodriguez, holistic chef and autoimmune warrior, and today on the podcast we have Dr. Amber Greer from Music City Health Center in Hendersonville, Tennessee. We are just going to have a little heart-to-heart open talk today. Autoimmune warrior to autoimmune warrior, parent to parent, and also going to pick her brain as a doctor. We are talking all about kids and nutrition and autoimmunity and teens and how the two connect. So welcome to the podcast today, Amber, or Dr. Greer.
Hey. Good morning. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you so much for being here. My goodness, I think it's been a while since I saw your beautiful face. You look lovely today.
Oh, thank you very much. We got the summer sweat still happening, so
we
will call it a glow. Yes. When you enter an age range to where you just want to hear the word glow rather than sweat mustache, but what's real is the sweat mustache. So
I love it. So for anybody who hasn't heard our last podcast episode together, which by the way, go back and listen to that after this episode, please tell us who you are and what you do.
Okay. I'm Dr. Amber Greer. Like she said, I'm at Music City Health Center in Hendersonville. I started out in chiropractic as my first step into becoming a holistic practitioner. And currently I've also taken on our functional medicine piece of this practice. So most of my days now I am adjusting at least 2 days a week. I still get some hands-on, but most of what I'm doing now is the functional medicine piece of our practice. And we love it, helping patients get, patients come to us if they're on medications and are looking for natural alternatives. We also talked, I believe, actually on our last call together, what does it look like for people who want true holistic preventative care? So we also do that for our patients, and just kind of build that bridge if they're wanting to get away from mainstream pharmaceuticals and understand anti-inflammatory living lifestyle, what that looks like. So of course, autoimmune patients are near and dear to my heart. We do take a lot of autoimmune cases here because of my health history with autoimmune disease. I mean, it's why I do this now. So we've got all types of patients, but mostly we see women, of course, every age and stage. But the majority of my ladies, when we talk about autoimmune disease, our bodies start to fall apart somewhere in our 30s has kind of been the trend. I am starting to see it younger and younger. And with myself, my first diagnosis was whenever I was 19. So, autoimmune disease, I know that's your bread and butter for what you're doing to teach people how to live. And I love what you do. And I'm so passionate about helping people understand that, it's not a death sentence and there are ways to reverse your conditions. And so that's a little bit about what we do. And then the chiropractic side, I do have hands-on patients. We adjust kiddos, pregnant mamas, brand new babies. So every age and stage. And then our oldest patient is 87. So.
Wow, amazing.
Yes.
And I hope you have her for another 10 years.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, that's our plan.
That's awesome.
That's right.
Wonderful. So let's go ahead and touch on very briefly the autoimmune conditions that you have, because I know there are a few.
Yes. So
you're extra special.
Extra special. Just got a whole pack of them. My first diagnosis I received whenever I was 19, and that was autoimmune thyroid. For those of you that have autoimmune conditions or maybe familiar with, there's Hashimoto's and then there's just autoimmune thyroid. And I never have been in the category of Hashimoto's. That requires a little bit different testing. So autoimmune thyroid seems even more nebulous because the doctor just said, hey, your thyroid's attacking itself and giving up. So you're just gonna, keep getting heavier and heavier, right? Yeah. So that was the first one. And then a couple of years later, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. There's also now PCOD, which is a disease, but it was still just called PCOS whenever I was diagnosed. And then PCOS with infertility, so I would go on to do the small amount of pharmaceuticals that I wanted to try. I'd never went through IVF. I knew just cost and what that would do to my body. It just wasn't going to be worth it. So we just pill popped and managed different prescriptions to try to help me conceive. And that did not work with the PCOS. I wouldn't conceive until much later. But the most difficult condition, and it came about in my late 20s, incidentally, after all of those meds to try to get pregnant, my guts then fell apart. So I also have ulcerative colitis, and that is still the most difficult to manage as far as symptoms and flares that come and go. But right now I'm feeling great. So I've been able to be away from the steroids and the biologics now for the last almost 8 years. So
wow. That's incredible. Wow.
Yes, such a relief to not be living either injection to injection or, pill pack to pill pack. So
wow. Well, congratulations to you. That is no easy feat. Wow. Okay, so today we're here to talk about kids because you are a mom. You have 2 kids, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. I have 2 kids and a bonus son. He's 17. He's a senior this year. So I'm feeling super old this morning. That's okay. School just started back. But he's great. He's just growing up into, a young man.
About to be a man. Yeah. Wow.
Yes. Crazy.
So in our last podcast interview, you had said that you got the kiddos on a good plan, meaning when you had first started your autoimmune healing journey and you started, after you had kind of addressed your diet and changed your diet, then you went on to, change the kids' diet as well. I think this is by far one of the most difficult things that I experience with my clients, beyond getting to that point where they decide to finally start to use food as medicine for themselves. Then it's like, okay, well, what am I going to do with the rest of the family? Because they're not going to want to get on board. So I would love to know, like, did your kids push back against you when you changed their food? Tell me everything. Tell me how you did it, and were they resistant to it, and was it difficult?
So I do want to say that the younger, the better. So I started mine when they were young enough and they didn't know a whole lot of difference. I get more pushback now that they're 9 and 7 and they are in school and they see what their friends get to have. So full disclosure, this is an everyday thing. When you choose to use food as medicine, when you choose to step into digging deep and understanding what healthy food is, unfortunately, we're just so ingrained to reach for what's convenient, and what's convenient is full of crap. Right. And that's really the bottom line. It's full of inflammatory toxins that just aren't food. So when I first started, the very first step for me with my son, we weren't doing well breastfeeding because I was really sick when I had him. And so I noticed right away that even the organic formula that I was using to supplement what I could provide with breast milk was not good enough. So I started digging into and making my own formula for him.
Oh, wow.
And then we weren't fully, I was still pretty isolated in the way I was eating. So my husband would still have foods that he wanted to have, and I had not put myself through as complete a testing yet because I was just in survival mode. So I did start making his formula, supplementing, and I used a fantastic book. If I can get the title to you, I don't have it with me today, but it's a superfoods book. Some of the pioneers, MDs in holistic nutrition, really helped me be able to understand how to feed the little babies, little age and stage. But it changes the bigger they get. So it took some time, and honestly, watching their little bodies have such extreme reactions. Sick mamas make sick babies, and that's not to be negative. That's just how the body works. And I noticed when my daughter came along, when she was old enough to start having little crackers, even if it was something, organic or clean or understanding non-GMO, even if she had a healthy version of gluten, she would get the same, they almost look like psoriatic patches that I would get. She'd get it in the same spots on her body. Like, it was bizarre
Mm,
how much of a copy our babies are of our immune systems when they're
yes.
tiny. They really start to differentiate when the child is between 18 and 24 months. So watching her little body, especially my son, he had a couple of different skin presentations and episodes of hives where one minute he's fine and the next minute he's full body hives and reactivities. So, so much of this, you're trying to learn because tiny babies can't talk to you. But I knew, okay, the bigger they get, the more careful we have to be,
Mhm.
so we started them early, and we had a couple of years in there where if we would bend, occasionally maybe we'd eat at restaurants a couple of times a week. And I never tell my patients or my friends or our family, it's not easy to cook at home 3 meals a day for everyone. We do get tired, but learning very quickly, okay, we get sick when we go to restaurants. We can't control the ingredients when we're out and about. So it really took a great heart to heart with my husband. Just, you have to get on the same page. If there is a partner in the home helping you raise your kids, right? We had to get on the same page. Okay, I'm drawing some hard lines. These, as the manager of health in this household, we are not having X, Y, and Z. And so I've now spent a great amount of time making sure that healthy eating is expensive, right? I'm sure you get that, expensive, right? We want to help with that. And we'll probably talk more about that in a minute. But once we made a hard line, I start with a short list, and a short list meaning no high fructose corn syrup, no processed sugar. And if we just pulled out gluten, those were the steps that we took to start, because
That's
I
pretty
knew
easy. I mean, it's hard, but it's also easy. Like, it wasn't that
just three
extreme.
things,
Yeah,
right? That's right.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I tried to pace myself on, not overwhelming my husband. And two, when you have groceries on the shelf and you've got, two and sometimes three kiddos in the house, it's like, well, we don't want to throw all this out. So we have to
Yes.
take gradual steps. So we started with those things. And once I got them on board, and again, when your kids are little and they don't know any better, you just change what's in front of them. And we will talk about specific meals if you want, but
Mhm.
I tried to make my list short. And over time, we added in changes with dairy, and then the quality of what you're eating, understanding how to remove seed oils. So it's definitely, I didn't just snap my fingers and know what to do overnight. You have to be sick enough to care. And then there is some trial and error before the kids are old enough for either blood testing or
Mhm.
stool testing or whatever you might want to do. But between canola products and corn products and soy products, I just started with a 3, and then we add more over time.
I just love
So
everything about you. Can we hang out and be best friends? Because you are speaking my language, girl. Okay.
absolutely. Yes, yes.
This is exactly what I teach inside the Flare Free Cooking Academy, inside my Flare Free Pantry Makeover mini course on my Instagram. Like, I teach this all the time. Slow, gradual baby steps. You have to take it one day at a time, one meal at a time, one ingredient at a time. And I love what you did, and you put your health and your family and your wellness and their health first, and drew that line in the sand and put a little very peaceful but very firm um, ultimatum that we're not going to have high fructose corn syrup. We're not going to have processed sugar. We're not going to have gluten in this house. It doesn't mean we're not going to have it ever, but it means I'm not going to bring it into this house, because out of sight, out of mind, and out of our mouths, right? If we don't have it, we can't eat it.
That's
And if
right.
we're
Absolutely.
eating, 80% of our meals at home, that is going to make our health skyrocket in the grand scheme of things, really, over time. So I love that. And also, I talk about this, but maybe I don't talk about it enough. When I first started my healing journey, I took out one thing at a time. It was, first, I took out sugar. Then I took out dairy because I was like, well, surely dairy is what's causing my eczema. It's not gluten. I took out dairy. It did not make the eczema go away. So then I finally decided to take out gluten, which, by the way, I was still drinking beer at that time when I was gluten-free because I didn't know that beer was made from wheat.
Right, the crossover, yes, the buddies
Yes.
of gluten, right?
Yes. So then once I finally stopped drinking beer and switched to wine, I really was gluten-free. And that's when my healing really skyrocketed. So I think what you had just said is a very important note to take for everybody that's listening. Take it slow, find out what your ultimatums are, and make that known with the family in a very loving, peaceful way. This is not because I don't want you to have bad foods. It's not because you're a bad eater. It's not because this or that. I'm not punishing you, but it's because I know how it makes me feel. I see what it's doing to you, and I don't want you to get to where I am. And I think that's really the premise behind what I'm doing right now with my upcoming flare-free back to school pantry refresh, which is just teaching people that autoimmunity statistically is on the rise amongst younger kids. It has tripled for 12-year-olds to 9-year-olds since 1988, which I think you and I would technically be a part of that statistic because I started having symptoms of my arthritis in high school and you were diagnosed at 19, right? So technically we're part of that statistic. And I'm not saying that changing my daughter's diet is going to prevent her from getting arthritis or any other autoimmune condition. I can only hope that it would help, or maybe that it would help her if she did end up with a diagnosis, not have these debilitating symptoms that I had to suffer with for years, right? And so everything that you just said was so amazing. So thank you for sharing that. Do your kids eat school lunch or do they take their own lunch?
Okay, I love this question. We're gonna absolutely not. We pack their lunch every day. I do, they are in public school.
Okay.
So we send letters at the beginning of the year to remind the teachers or tell the new teachers that they have our food restrictions. Our big categories are the gluten and dairy at school. If I know other moms out there, we're always fighting the battle of treats and cakes and candy. And, you mentioned that you started right away with removing actual sugar. Anytime you see even evaporated organic cane sugar on a label, that's just a lot of fancy words that still is sugar, right? So my kids are in the public school system. I feel like they get sugar for everything. So we do pack their lunches. We feed them breakfast at home. So they offer breakfast at school now too, but they don't do that. And then we send special snacks on birthday party days whenever I know that the kids are going to be exposed to whatever's coming in, cupcakes or candy. And the schools do try to encourage fruit and maybe some popcorn and lower sugar things, but no. My rule of thumb is if the food is free. In the past few years, they are offering free lunch and free breakfast through a government program. Unfortunately, it's going to be sort of bottom of the barrel quality. And it's just not worth it for everything inflammatory that they would have in those meals.
I will say, speaking from personal experience, my daughter went to first grade and we sent her with her lunch. And then midway through the week, this is the first week of school for first grade. Midway through the week, no, I'm sorry, this was kindergarten. She was 5 years old. Midway through the week, she's coming back home with all this food in her lunchbox. And I said, honey, why didn't you eat your lunch? Are you okay? Is your tummy hurt or something? She goes, oh no, I jumped in the lunch line. I saw what everybody else was getting and I wanted that too. So she just helped herself, jumped in the lunch line without having, payment card or anything. So we ended up getting a bill and all this stuff. So we were like, okay, all right. So for the first year she was in school in kindergarten, we let her have school lunch. And my God, did her behavior change dramatically. So ever since kindergarten, she has not been able to eat school lunch anymore because it was so horrible. So horrible. The things that they serve is not food. It just isn't, And then she went to Sumner Scholars this summer. And I feel bad saying this out loud because gosh, I'm not trying to like bash the school system in any way. This is just, this is a national problem that we have with the food that we serve in
Absolutely.
schools.
Yes.
But they were serving donuts for breakfast and then pizza, chicken nuggets, things like that for lunch. And I'm thinking, this child hasn't had a vegetable all day. So she got to have breakfast and lunch the first day of Sumner Scholars. And then we went back to it because it's like, I tried to allow you to have this thing that you see everybody else having, but I can't do it because it is so horrible for them. And their bodies are so tiny and it's so full of toxins and glyphosate and sugar and all of these things that you really can't handle. It's so bad for the gut. It's so bad for the brain. It's so bad for their bodies. So
Absolutely.
if you can afford it, because I know a lot of folks can't afford to send their kids with a homemade lunch. If you can afford it, just making that one simple little change, even if it is white bread with bologna, I think would be better than whatever they're serving at school, the pizzas and the chicken nuggets and the donuts and the cookies.
Right. And I did want to mention this is a patient story, because it is absolutely a national issue. My parents work in the school system. They're in a very large school system outside of the Atlanta area in Georgia. I used to practice and have just a single solo practitioner clinic in Asheville, North Carolina.
Okay.
But I will never forget one of my patients there because he was one of the few males that I was treating for functional medicine. Most of the women are the ones that care, but this guy, so at the time he was 36 years old. He is still probably, he is 6'5". So he's 6'5", 36 years old. He started blood pressure medications at the age of 17. He was a school athlete, but he was very large. When we met at the height of 6'5", he was 400 pounds then, and he had lost 50 on his own before we connected, and he wanted to do some testing and dig in a little deeper with more functional nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
I also did hands-on work for this guy as far as chiropractic, and it was like, oh dear, that's like a foot and a half, okay, that this guy has on me almost, right?
Sure.
But we were talking one day and we were going through some of the things, just the simple swaps, because he had a wife who had PCOS and fertility. They were not able to have babies and they had adopted out of the foster system. So they had this huge heart for children and they weren't able to have them. And here this man was leading the charge for his family. So I was so proud of him. But we were sitting there and I had been we've been working together for a couple of months and he was down about 60 pounds. And he said, I have to wonder. I grew up very poor and my dad left and my mom got a job at the school as a lunch lady. He said, so she would get to bring home she would get to bring home leftover food from the school lunch program. And I would eat that for dinner. I would have school lunch breakfast and then whatever was being served that day. And I was like, oh my gosh, we didn't dive into his childhood as much because we were so focused on how do we get weight off of you now? What do we need to do, to help with your family and baby steps at home? And he said, I ate that way from the age of 6 all the way up until high school. And then in high school, I got a job. So then I could go and I didn't have to have, school lunch every day, but I could go and get, McDonald's or Burger King, whatever fast food the high school kids wanted to eat.
Sure.
And as a high school football player, because he was a big old boy and he played sports and all the things, he said, I got sacked in the back. I had a severe sports injury and I almost had a heart attack at 17. So at 17, this young man, still a child, even though he's huge, he said, at 17, I was put on, I guess you could say like a cocktail because my blood pressure medications, they put me on 3. And then by the time he was 22, he was on cholesterol meds. And that story will never leave me because of the connection to school food. And he said, I was given, we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have, my mom's out here just trying to provide and was able to get a job as a lunch lady, but that's how we were fed. And she never came home and made anything from scratch or even from the grocery store, because she knew as long as she kept her job, we had access to the food.
Yeah.
And this was back then, so he's probably almost 40 now, a couple of years ago, but you think about that timeline, and I'm not much older than he is, but this is what we've been dealing with for decades, of what we just give to our kiddos. And I love our school that our kids get to go to. I love the staff and the teachers, but I cannot let them have school lunch every day, because not only does their behavior suffer, but their tummies hurt. Mine gets skin rashes. My son, he gets this thing with his eyes where the eyelids will actually swell when he's had too much dairy. And he'll say, "Mommy, there must be dairy in something." He's kind of rubbing his eyes. We've identified how it makes you feel. But I just, particularly the school lunch, my rule of thumb is, if somebody's offering the meal for free, in a school setting, it's not healthy. It's full of fillers.
Well, let's talk about this too, because this might be a little bit controversial, and I don't know what your opinion is on this, but this is something that my daughter experienced when she was eating school lunches, is growing pains. And I say that with air quotes, because was it growing pains or was it joint pain? Because
joint pain, stiffness in their muscles.
he hasn't
Absolutely.
had growing pains ever since.
Ever since.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. Because I was reading on growing pains, and it's the length of the long bones. So growing pains, they'll get in and around their knees, but not in the knee, so to speak. Their bones don't fully calcify. 13 to about 17 for girls. A little bit later for boys is when you see that full calcification. So their bones are still cartilaginous, meaning they're a lot more bendy, right? Mm-hmm. So whenever they're having those growing pains, because I started digging into growing pains, I have a nephew that he's always got growing pains. Oh, he grew so tall so fast. And that's what you hear doctors say. My kids have never experienced that. And that nephew, his mom works in the school system, and they don't do healthy eating as a family overall. But I do think that that's interesting, because their bones are so influential. Like, you can influence them. They bend. This is why, bone health is sort of my jam. But
Yeah.
bone marrow, what builds our red blood cells, is in the depth of our bones. So when you think about that, there's the only things that you do day in and day out are eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom, right? Every single day, every cell in your body is affected by those things. So if you don't go to the bathroom enough, you've got to back up, and if you're eating junk, you're building your body from the inside out with junk. Why would you want to build a lovely home on a sand foundation, right? If we break it down like that, and that's what we're doing for these kids. At the deep core cellular level, the innermost workings of the bones, is if they are having pain, it's part of the reason is because their bodies are being fueled with crap that the body doesn't know what to do with, these synthetic chemicals that have no place in an organic environment.
And lacking the proper nutrients that we need in order to grow healthy bones, like vitamin D and vitamin A and things like that. Absolutely. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Lacking the vitamins, the trace minerals. We talk a lot about trace minerals, and then balance of electrolytes. Mm-hmm. Electrolytes are the driver between your involuntary smooth muscle, so your heart, your intestines, right? Things that move without you having to say, okay, I want to reach for my glass here, right? The involuntary muscles, it's the balance of electrolytes that allows those muscles to continue to work. So not only are you've got your bones to worry about, right? But you also need proper trace minerals and electrolytes. Magnesium is a big one, potassium. Those are the bigger electrolytes, but trace minerals are your copper, zinc, selenium, things that we should have access to when we're eating healthy fruits and vegetables. But our soil is also very depleted and poisoned with glyphosate, like you already mentioned, right? So we don't even get that anymore, right? Yeah. You have to work very hard to have vegetables that are quality, right? It's not like it was 50 years ago when your vegetable, what was in the soil, you could get the job done nutritionally or what your body needed by just trusting the vegetables that you were eating, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's absolutely important to, again, I can't stress it enough to parents. I know that it's convenient to make blue box mac and cheese, or it's convenient to heat up Hot Pockets in the microwave. We're inundated with convenience and unhealthy options. So any support that I can give, here today, just taking small steps and understanding maybe how to shop and make changes, it's what gets me out of bed in the mornings.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're absolutely right. And a couple things, like number one, I'm literally drinking water with trace minerals and lemon juice. If you ever see me with a straw, it's because I have to add ice and lemon juice to get the taste. If you add trace minerals to your water, it tastes like milk. It's crazy.
It gets kind of milky and a little bit salty.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So definitely huge fan of trace minerals, especially if you drink filtered water, right? Because it takes the minerals out of the water. And so like reverse osmosis, water will be, lacking minerals. So you want to add minerals to your water if you can. But also, let's talk about the shopping thing, as you were saying. So what are your favorite places to shop for anti-inflammatory ingredients? Where do you shop?
My favorite places. This happened. We can thank COVID for this, because COVID spoiled us all for getting the stuff delivered to us. So when I was still living in Asheville, I had access to Whole Foods delivery. And I want to tell you, because I understand that it is expensive and it is a change. Our family, part of that conversation before, where we drew a line in the sand and understanding what it was going to take to get healthy ingredients in the door, of course, you have to have the money talk. I'm sorry, I hate that it is what it is, but the fact is that the healthy organic stuff, even non-GMO, the stuff is more expensive. Because
Just
the
buying
chemicals
like fresh vegetables versus a canned vegetable.
versus a can, because the
Yeah.
other is so much easier to make, right? Or to produce. So we had to have that conversation. And we can talk specifics about budget, but my very favorite places now that I live here, I do keep a Thrive Market subscription. We prioritized the meats that we do eat in our house. Those non-negotiable have to be clean, grass-fed, pasture-raised. I am personally using a Butcher Box subscription still that came with me when we moved. But there are some amazing farms. I'm sure you're a great resource for that. I don't know as many local farms, and I've been doing Butcher Box now for several years to just get it to the door. So Thrive Market, Whole Foods, I do keep Sam's and a Sam's Club, and there are some really good things there, some gems that you can find at more of a wholesale cost. And then I'm always amazed at what you can actually get organically through Walmart now. So they are opening up some more options there. So I do shop there. And then Amazon Fresh has some organics if you're needing a delivery service. And I know that we have organic, pretty good options at Kroger. The Hendersonville Kroger has some good options. Publix has good options. It does seem that Publix across the board is more pricey. And then we do kind of an Aldi haul. We were doing Aldi hauls every week. Now some of that stuff I don't get to Aldi as often, but it's kind of a balancing act. I'm not going to find everything that I need for my family in one place. For the best prices. So, and I work hard. Like I get my tabs open. I'm like, all right, who's got this week? Who's doing what for the price point? Because it does add up. And, but I also know that our budget on eating out and restaurant experiences is very, very low, because quite frankly, if I want a steak, it's gonna taste much better what we've made at home than I'm gonna be able to get in any restaurant. So there's
absolutely. Well, let's unpack that just a little bit. But before we do that, I do want to mention, when we're talking about budgeting for For our grocery bill, right? So we're making the change if you want to embrace the flare-free lifestyle from eating factory farmed meats, the cheapest meats you can find on the store, to at the bare minimum, if you can only go to Walmart, you can get the organic chicken, you can get the grass-fed beef, the grass-fed lamb. But if you want to take it a step further, you can get a Butcher Box membership, or you can sign up with Imperfect Foods. They have tons of organic pastured turkey and chicken as well, which is one of the harder things to find. You can find grass-fed ground beef pretty much anywhere nowadays. But you're not going to be able to get specialty cuts. I know Publix has, not all the time, sometimes they have organic grass-fed filet mignon. Sometimes Kroger will have the grass-fed ribeye or New York strip, but one steak is going to run you $20 versus two for 20. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's literally double the price for some of the grass-fed meat. So that's where Butcher Box and Imperfect Foods is a great resource to have. But Aldi, Kroger, Publix, Amazon Fresh, Thrive, Sam's Club, and Walmart. So inside my Flare Free Pantry Makeover mini course, I provide grocery lists with pictures and brand suggestions to show you what you can find at each of these stores. And Aldi, Kroger, Publix, Amazon, Sam's Club, and Walmart are all included, and Whole Foods. So the only thing I don't have in there would be Thrive and then Butcher Box, which Thrive is kind of like Imperfect Foods, which is the one that I use.
Okay.
And so it's really similar. They have a lot of the same brands. You can get a lot of dairy-free products there, which is cool. And then, pastured eggs and pastured meat and stuff.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I would say for anybody that's on a budget and looking to eat flare free, I know that it's difficult to wrap your brain around paying the difference in price, but it's either you pay now or you pay later in hospital bills. You pay later in,
Right. That's right.
doctor bills, right? So you could think about it that way. And once you embrace that mindset shift, it makes that grocery bill feel a little bit less painful,
Overwhelming. Yes.
Yeah.
So I had a friend, she's a colleague that we went through Cairo school together, and she would say, you're either going to pay your grocer or your doctor, so that kind of stuck with me because
Your
back.
farmer or your pharmacy.
That's right. That's right. Farmer pharmacy, it costs money. It's expensive to be healthy, but it's expensive to be sick.
Oh.
So the budget conversation, because when you're first looking at the prices are higher, and then you've probably already noticed that quantities are lower.
Yeah.
So even if we splurge on dairy and I do like a raw milk cheese,
Yeah.
that raw milk cheese, what I'm going to get, versus a block of regular cheese, it's less as far as ounces. Yes, but we consider that raw milk cheese is a luxury item. So we do it for special things. I would encourage, when you're first making these steps, the biggest thing to prioritize is budgetarily would be meats, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Meats in our livestock, if you can believe this and wrap your brain around it, they have more of the antibiotics and pharmaceuticals pumped into them than even our people population, our human population. The livestock industry takes so much more of those. So, getting to where.
Let's pause for half a second and explain that
Yeah.
for people that are unfamiliar. So livestock companies will give the animals antibiotics to help them grow faster. Is that correct?
They give them antibiotics, and there's a couple of different things, because they're going to give them antibiotics and vaccines to keep keep them well. But then the growth hormones that they give them, especially poultry, the growth hormones that they give them to keep them growing faster, that's also pumped in, and it's really difficult to know what, if in a shot, is it just an antibiotic? And the answer is no. But right, there's this cocktail of growth hormone that gets plugged into everything. So the excuse is, we want to keep them disease free and all this stuff. But those injectables are laden with these growth hormones, because bigger, faster gives you the harvest, or I don't know if you call it harvest, but much faster, right? So they're getting less movement because they're trapped in these horrible environments, cattle included, and then they're just being pumped up with what's in the injectables and then what's in the food. So chickens, it is tough whenever you talk about eggs and poultry, because they are overall, they are less clean animals than your cattle. So grass-fed beef is going to be bite for bite a little more nutrient dense than your poultry. And then harder still is to find the poultry that really does get to eat the way they're designed to eat, rather than being grain fed, because those grains have already been manipulated and processed, and they're, the same
spray with
thing.
glyphosate and all the things. So not only is a chicken that's raised in a barn with hundreds, if not thousands of other chickens, they never see the light of day. That's your standard factory farm meat that you're going to see on the grocery shelves from Purdue, or maybe, Simple Truth, or any type of like brand name, grocery store meat. If it doesn't say organic on it, if it doesn't say pasture raised, that means that it was, well, even organic chickens can be grown in a barn if it doesn't say pasture raised. So if it doesn't say pasture raised on it, that means that the animal was solely grain fed. They put antibiotics in their food, antibiotics in their medications.
Right.
And so not only are you getting these overly processed, spray with glyphosate, grain fed animals, which now you are ingesting, but also the medications that they're pumping them with, right? And so you are, the quality of the meat is only as good as the quality of the animal's life, right? So it's important to eat meat that is raised ethically, and the animals are living in the environment they were designed to live in, and eating the things that they were naturally designed to eat. So pasture raised means that the chickens and the turkeys, they grow on pasture, on grass, they eat bugs and slugs and all the things that chickens love to eat, which is a lot of stuff. Chickens will eat anything. Chickens will eat chicken. They'll eat eggs. They love everything.
They will eat anything. That's right.
And the same thing for cattle, like lamb, sheep, and cows. They're literally designed to eat grass. I believe pigs will eat anything. Sheep will kind of eat anything as well. They'll eat, thorns and anything they can get their hands on, right?
Yes.
But when they're grown on pasture, they're eating mostly vegetation, right? Whether that's acorns or, poison ivy. Your sheep will eat poison ivy, your goats will eat poison ivy. But it's going to make for a much healthier meat, which is higher in omega-3s, higher in vitamin A, vitamin D, which means that it's better for us, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
And less inflammatory.
And that's also the cost difference. Everybody sort of knows, even if they don't know much about, eating food as medicine. We all know if I go to the grocery store, a steak is going to always cost me more than a chicken breast, right? Because the animals, the way they're raised, and what you said about pigs as well, they will eat anything, right? They are smaller animals, and so they will have, you'll have cheaper options, right, for the animals that aren't as clean. But we all know that red meat costs more, and I think it's really interesting with the attempt to replace our red meat with all of this fake meat that's out there right now. But the red meat, you already said the red meat is so full of omega-3s. Red meat is incredibly good for your heart and cardiovascular system when you've eaten red meat that is of good quality, right? And so I do love that, even Aldi, like you said, Aldi and Kroger,
Walmart, Kroger, yeah.
You can get, if that's your basic, if you have to start with just grass-fed ground beef, because ground beef is pretty cheap, start there. And we even kind of pulled back the layers before I started doing Butcher Box. Now I had some farmer access whenever we lived in Asheville, so I knew, okay, this turkey, he would do like Thanksgiving turkeys for us and some other things, but I could never find clean poultry around there. So we just were kind of heavy on the red meat or no meat meals for a while, because I couldn't find a clean source. So that also led me to, the delivery service. But, and I don't do a lot of pork just because I don't care for it. It can be very clean. There are much cleaner sources, but when you understand what the animal eats, right? You're getting that whenever you take that on. So
Mhm.
that's why it's so important to, I encourage people, if you're still not organic with all the fruits and vegetables or whatever else you're eating, prioritize the cleanest meats that you can afford first. And even digestively, we
Mhm.
burn through carbohydrates and starches and right, your rice, your noodles, your pastas, your breads. We burn through that a lot faster. Your proteins, your fats, those take longer. They live in the body longer, and they're also the cell walls. They're building that structure. So again, let's get it as clean as we can, right? As your
Absolutely. I think
change.
when I first started my healing journey, because the cost of food was so much more expensive to eat organic, which by the way, groceries here are just more expensive. When we moved to Nashville, we were like, oh my gosh, everything is so expensive. And that actually prompted us to go fully organic because I was like, it's really not that much more expensive to get the grass fed than the regular. So why wouldn't I get the better one? Whereas in Chicago, the groceries are so cheap, so affordable. It's not the same here. So I felt like groceries were expensive. It wasn't that much more to get organic. So that kind of pushed me to do that. But what we did was we always bought grass-fed beef and then chicken thighs or whole chickens. Those are going to be your cheapest options for organic and pasture raised. Um, but we stretched our meat. We would eat maybe 4 ounces, or I'm sorry, yeah, we would eat about 2 to 3 ounces per person versus 6 or 8 or something like that. And we really bulked up on our vegetables. We started a garden. That was a cheaper way for us to eat. But treating meat as more of a garnish, like a lot of cultures do around the world, is a great way to stretch your grocery bill, especially if you're, splurging on those luxury items, those grass-fed and pasture-raised meat ingredients or wild-caught seafood. But you just want to make sure in doing so that you're not sacrificing your protein content. You'll have to get that protein from another source, if it's from beans or legumes or green vegetables and things like that, so that you're not compromising on, as you were saying, the building blocks of our muscles, the building blocks of our cells is protein, and we need good quality protein at
Absolutely.
every meal, especially as we get older.
Well, and the amount certainly is important. And this is unpopular, but there are some incredible things that you get in a can. Wild caught tuna you can get in a can now. We do a lot of wild caught, well, all of the sardines are wild caught, canned mackerel.
Yeah.
Mackerel and sardines are right up there with bison and beef as far as your omega-3s. So
Yeah.
I usually get a few looks when I suggest that people eat sardines or mackerel. It's not as popular in our culture
Yeah.
to eat those types of fish, but they are incredibly healthy for us. Right now, our pantry is always stocked with those, the canned products. We use a lot of Wild Planet. I
Yeah.
enjoy the Wild Planet, and then actually get sardines shipped in bulk
Mhm.
for me. So it's kind of a joke here around the office, but they are so good for you. And I started one of the earliest mash products beyond the fruit and veggie purees for my kiddos, but I would do a sardine mash with a little
Mhm.
bit of coconut oil, coconut cream, excuse me. And my husband thought it was the grossest thing to be feeding these babies, but they were about 16 months. And you guys, they loved it. And even now, like that's a quick lunch on the weekend is just to take that out. I'll kind of flake it. I may add a little more olive oil and salt. So I don't expect that if you're new to this type of living that you're just going to put sardines on a plate for your kid. But we didn't have a ton of money growing up, and I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and there were always sardines in the house. So I
Mm.
don't know, I don't know if that's just who liked them. I don't know. I just know that I sort of grew up eating them. And so sardines and tuna. And when I was old enough because I hated school lunch growing up, and my mom was like, all right, if you're not going to do school lunch, you're going to make your own. So I would just make up my little tuna sandwiches, and that
Wow.
was kind of my go-to. So
Wow.
again, sandwich on wheat bread, and you're still having a little bit of I'm sure you know what Miracle Whip is,
Yeah.
but that's what I did growing up because I just didn't like school lunch. It didn't make me feel good. So I at least
Mm.
did that. But then it was like, my mom's got all these kids. So if you don't want to eat what's there, you can make it yourself, you know?
Also known as your siblings.
Right, right.
My
And then,
mom's
yeah,
got all
it
these
wasn't
kids.
wasn't long before I was making lunches for more kids by the time,
Wow.
like
Yeah.
fifth and sixth grade. But that's just what I grew up eating.
Wow.
So, the sooner you can introduce the healthy things, the sooner the better. Because I kind of mentioned this when we chatted before, but if I could have had somebody to step in my teens and early 20s, so much of the damage was done by that point. That's when the switch flipped. When the
Yeah.
switch flips to an autoimmune diagnosis,
Yes.
it's much more difficult to undo that, go backwards, and achieve
Yes.
healing
Yes.
because you've been in this inflamed state as a tiny little developing person.
It takes years to develop autoimmunity. It takes years
Right.
to reverse it. So if you can stop that, if you can halt it, if you can slow down the process, by all means, do it. If that's from lessening your kids' exposure to toxins, you know, creating a more peaceful environment and less stress and less trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, changing their food, being more present with your kids, bringing more joy into their lives, whatever these things that we have to do, right? Then do it. Why wouldn't you? Why would you want your kid to suffer from what you're going through? Why?
Why?
We
That's right.
don't want to do
Absolutely.
that. No parent wants their child to suffer, and every parent wants better for their kids than they had. So absolutely, knowing better makes you do better, and that's all we can do is constantly learn and try to improve. So this is one way that we can do it. So let me
Absolutely.
ask you, are you making sardine sandwiches for your kids for lunch, or what are they eating for lunch?
Okay, so they don't eat it on bread. My daughter will eat them just filleted with a little extra sea salt. So she'll just eat them with a spoon, and then the crunchy on the side will either be like carrots and hummus. That's kind of their favorite crunchy combo. And then I also use some almond crackers, Simple Mills.
Yeah,
So we usually have some sort of Simple Mills cracker on hand. I will do, if they eat a tuna variety, I'll do the tuna and I'll flake it. We use the Primal Kitchen mayo. I'm not a mayo person really across the board.
okay,
Everybody else in the house likes it. We've actually, my husband and I went through a period of time where he was making our own mayo.
sure, yeah.
I don't know where he found this recipe, but everything was good and clean. I'm like, if it's worth it, sir, you do it. Uh, but sometimes you just need a little extra. So I'll flake that, and then we will put that sometimes on sandwiches, but I try to get them to eat it. They'll eat them on lettuce wraps, or they just enjoy it plain. I don't put coconut and cream in it anymore. Right. But yeah, they just eat it as a protein, they just eat it as a meat. And then, like I said, you'll almost always find, hummus and some sort of veggies that they can dip in. Either we pre-chop cucumbers or keep the carrots on hand. But they really enjoy it. There's no stigma around it. Like whenever I was a kid, it's like, oh, that's gross. Like they don't know that because it's always in the house. I do
Yeah.
anticipate that to change as they get older.
Mhm.
And I do get, like we mentioned before, I do get some pushback whenever they see their kids, other kids having ice cream, fast food, but for the most part right now they know, and my son especially has embraced, he wants his body to feel good. And now that I'm more open with them about how sick that I've been, I used to try to hide that when they were smaller, just, be their mommy. They shouldn't have to be burdened with, why does my mommy not feel well? But now if I'm having a bad day, I tell them, you know, my tummy hurts today. I'm not going to be able to do all the things I want to do today. I'm going to need some extra rest. So we just have a really just quick conversation about it. And they say, I don't want that to happen to me when I grow up. So we've already planted those seeds of, we make these changes now so that you can be a really healthy adult.
Mhm.
Uh, because I don't want you to have this. And, I don't linger and, I haven't explained autoimmune disease and all of that to them. I just say, today's not a day that I'm feeling great. And that sometimes mommy's tummy hurts. And so we're going to take it easy today.
Mm-hmm.
And connect those dots and plant the little seeds, because when the birthday cakes and the cookie cakes and the snacks and the holidays are coming, right? When all those things are coming at them and they're 7 and 9, of course they want to try those things,
Mm-hmm.
building that foundation and making it a little easier to make choices that are better for them.
Mm-hmm. I think it is so important to talk to your kids. Talk to
Absolutely.
your kids. When you feel like it's time and that they're ready, like you said, you don't have to explain autoimmunity to them. You don't have to,
Right.
you have to
Right.
put them into your misery to a certain extent, but it's okay to say, my daughter will always say, she'll have something, I don't remember what it is. And I'll be like, she'll be like, oh, can we get these? And I'm like, no, mommy can't have that. Well, why not? I'm like, because it has gluten in it. And I just tell her every single time, no matter how many times she asks me, mommy can't have that, so we're not going to have it in the house. Because if I can't have it, then nobody can. Unfortunately, in my house, that's the way it is. Because if I have a
Right.
big giant bag of pretzels sitting there, I'm going to be so darn tempted to eat a big bag of pretzels. So
Right.
this is just how it is in our house. So I'm not afraid to tell her every little thing, right? And so talk to your kids, draw a line in the sand for your family, create a plan, have a meeting, but approach it in a peaceful, loving way, right? It's not a bad thing. Nobody's getting punished. This is what we have to do. This is what mommy has to do to be well. And I want you to be well. My daughter had a really scary hospitalization a couple of years ago. Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you ready to get the kiddos on a good plan and transform their favorite foods into anti-inflammatory versions of their favorite foods so that you can set them up for a flare-free school year? Join my free workshop happening on August 19th at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, my back to school flare-free pantry refresh workshop. It's completely free, and I'll be teaching you how to navigate the grocery store, how to read labels, one-to-one common pantry substitutions, and how to change some of your kids' favorite foods into anti-inflammatory foods. It's going to be so fun. And if you show up live, you're going to get 3 different school lunch ideas, as well as a full grocery list with pictures, brand suggestions, and store locations for all of those favorite kid foods like mac and cheese, chicken nuggets, juice boxes, fruit snacks, all of the things. So definitely check it out in the show notes below and join us because it's coming up soon. Now back to the show. She had just randomly pain in her one leg, and she was kind of limping one day, and I was like, what in the world? And then all of a sudden she had pain in the second leg to where she couldn't walk, so she had to lay down all day. And then the pain went to her arm and then her other arm. So we were like, okay, what is going on? So we took her to the hospital. She had an autoimmune reaction to a virus that she had. They had no way of testing what the virus was. They did all this testing on her for Lyme and all this other stuff, and it just came back nothing. It was basically like some type of autoimmune reaction to a virus that she had, but they didn't know what virus it was. And we use that example every single time. Do you want to have trouble walking again? Do you want to end up in the hospital? Do you want to lose the ability to use your arms? Like, thankfully, it only lasted like a week, but that was a week where she was laid up in bed and she had so much pain in her legs and arms that she couldn't move. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so this is why mommy doesn't let you just have cupcakes at school. This is why mommy doesn't just buy the good ice cream, and
Right.
and the more they hear it, the more they understand. Kids are so smart. And I grew up in a generation where our parents didn't say anything to us. They didn't talk about any of the meaningful, important stuff where, explaining anything. It was just kind of like brush it under the rug, hush, hush, let's go about our day, let's get through everything. I am all about breaking it down, explaining to her so that she understands why mommy's saying no. And that makes it easier for them to hear no.
Right. And they need to be able to sit with it and process it. And we were kind of joking about sweet treats. And sometimes my kids would be like, Mommy, if I had a cupcake topped with a foot of icing and then marshmallows, would you let me eat it? They're just so goofy. And they usually they know I'm going to, say no, like absolutely not. But I did say, listen, in all seriousness, when you are a grown up, you can go out and eat and do whatever you want. I want you to be able to make the choice. Of course, I want you to make good choices, and the choices that I am teaching you now. In this house, mommy's in charge, but one day you'll be in charge, right? So we joke all the time, we're never going to have to worry about, not that we worry about piercings or tattoos, but, we're not going to worry about that. We're going to worry about my daughter derailing and going on like this fast food binge when she hits 18, because that's going to be the thing. So we don't make it this crazy, taboo thing, because I grew up in a similar household. We didn't talk about the things. You didn't really get a chance to talk about emotional process. And it's just, this is what we're doing, and you don't argue, right?
Yeah.
And not that I owe my kids an explanation for every decision I make. I'm still the adult, but just laying out, hey, this is why we do this. This is why. And when my stepson is with us, he comes and stays with us about a week per month, because he's been doing an online program for several years now. So it's kind of cool. We'll come in from Atlanta and hang with us for a week, sometimes 2 weeks. Very cool. And we went on vacation together on a family beach trip, and we all pack our groceries. And he said, I knew whenever I came in and brought a few snacks of my own to just look for this space of groceries for the food that's not real, like the food without the real gluten, the food without the real dairy. And I'm like, okay, sir, it is real food. But he knows when he's looking for our stuff. And he's even shared, he felt kind of embarrassed saying this, but he's like, when I come and stay at your house, my poop is insane. Like, I'm pooping 3 times a day, and I'm like, it's the food, I make him kind of these snacks I'll pre-make on the weekends when my husband travels to get him. And he knows, you've got to eat the way we eat. I make a few concessions, and I'll usually have some real cheese on hand for him. But he knows in our house, just the difference of what he eats at home and how his body responds. So, and I've been in his life since he was 3. So now to hear that, as an adult, a near adult who will eventually probably be out on his own, I guess, but eventually, fingers crossed. But just to hear him say that, I was like, oh, I know it's weird, but like, that's like a huge compliment. He's like,
I'm so proud.
Yeah. He's like, you load me up with all this like fiber, vegetables. He's like, anytime you make a sauce, I don't know what's in the sauce. I know how to eat it, but I don't know what else you put in it, because I usually blend like something else, if it's blended spinach or whatever. So he's like, I just know like you guys make it taste good. And he has learned to cook with us, which is pretty cool too.
That's awesome.
So it felt good. It's good for a stepmommy to hear that sometimes.
That's a huge accomplishment, especially coming from a teenager, right? Who probably would be completely content just eating the crackers and the mac and cheese and the fast food.
Oh my gosh. And the Cheetos, the spicy Cheetos, and
oh my gosh. Oh yeah. That reminds me of one other thing. I was thinking, oh, and the crackers are so expensive, and you watch them eat a whole box and you're like, oh my God, like just, oh, those crackers are so expensive. But that, I think buying expensive food and spending money on nutritious food, even if it costs more, it also teaches you to eat with intention, to not overeat, and to stretch your meals, and to, you know what I'm saying? You're not going to sit there and eat a whole, it's so easy to sit and overeat something that's horrible for you because it tastes so darn good. But it's harder to do that with healthy food. And even more so when it costs a lot of money. You're like, okay, I'm going to eat, 2 handfuls of crackers and not a whole box.
Not a whole box. And the kids will come in. So we do try to be really, I still use their baby plates, but they're, about this big with the dividers. There's something about feeling like you've finished that also tricks your brain into being full, tricks. So I'm always portioning out, especially like their little, we do the Siete, it's a siete, like vegan nacho chip. So it's a
Yeah.
cassava chip. And so I portion them out in smaller bags or containers for them to where you get to have this and now the bag is empty. So you know you're done.
Yeah.
Because we've all been there where you open up the bag of chips or you open up the crackers or you open up whatever, mindless eating, eating because you're bored, eating to fill an emotional void, right? We want to eat when we're hungry and make sure, more importantly, that you know when you're full. And so me anyway, we come from a background of like, oh, clean your plate, get your plate empty. Like, don't force them. Now, listen, if you didn't clean your plate, yeah, I'm going to save some of this. If you haven't touched it, we'll save it. And the next time you're hungry, because this is expensive food, we're saving it. It's going to be right here in the fridge and you can have it when you're hungry. Because sometimes they just say they're full to go run and play, and we don't enforce the clean your plate. But your body and your tummy says you're full, great. And you know what? When you tell me you're hungry, this is what you're going to have. So
verbatim what we do. And if my daughter like refuses to eat something because she doesn't like the way it tastes, I tell her, that's fine. You don't have to eat it, but you're not going to have a snack after this. So now you have to wait until the next meal time, because it takes tasting. And my daughter will turn her nose up at anything at any time of day, no matter if she's already had it before, it takes nothing for her to be like, oh, I don't want that. Okay, fine. But then as she sees me eating it, and then the next day she sees me eating it again, and I'm talking about how good it is, she'll be like, okay, I want some of that. And then she loves it. And then she's mad when it's gone. I'm like, you should have ate it yesterday when I had it. You see,
right.
Stop turning your nose up at stuff for no reason.
Yes.
It takes tasting multiple times to like something. And so if she doesn't like it today, it doesn't mean that she gets to scrape her plate into the garbage and then go have a snack. Oh no, you're going to eat that later, or you're going to wait for the next mealtime. No.
We joke, well, you've heard that, whenever you're learning to drink, so if you drink wine or even beer, I always heard growing up, beer is an acquired taste, right? You learn as you taste wine, you learn different things in the flavor profile. But if you just smell it, especially kids, if they ever smell, if we do have a glass of wine, they're like, oh, that's so stinky. How do you drink that? And I'm like, okay, this is how we learn. You train your taste buds, you train different receptors just when you're, and the same is true when you're leaving the junk food, right? The things in the food that make that McDonald's French fry taste like a McDonald's French fry, it's tasted the same for 20, 40 years, whatever, right? Those things are addictive chemicals that have trained your brain. So there is this learning curve where you have to retrain the brain to appreciate actual food, because so many of us, I feel like I was in my late teens before I really knew and understood this means that it's processed. This means, and I noticed I came up in the time where food used to just be food, and then they started putting nutrition labels and they had to disclose ingredients, right, on packaging. And so that kind of got the wheels turning whenever I was in my late teens of, okay, here's the difference. Here's a whole food, and here's something that's processed. And your brain has to unlearn that and become unaddicted to those chemicals that have made that cheese and peanut butter cracker taste that same way every time, right?
Your brain and your body, right?
Yes, your brain and your body. There's a detox period. So, back when my husband was first having to do what I say and eat healthy, he would be like, all right, if you make it taste good, I'll try it. If you can just, and we would experiment. And sometimes I've made plenty of meals that they were just so gross, like nobody could do it, and I hate that. And I'm like, dang it, this is so expensive. But we've had a lot of trial and error, but getting the kids involved, talking to them about why we're doing what we're doing, and then allowing them to tell me, hey, you know what, I'm full. All right. Guess what? This is going to be here for you when you get back. But I absolutely want you to respond to what your body's saying rather than force you to overeat and push past that point or making them feel sick,
Absolutely. And in speaking on, creating healthy habits for our kids, the things that we worry about, meaning when we're not in control of our children anymore and they're adults and they can buy their own groceries and make their own decisions and drive their cars straight to McDonald's.
Right. Yep.
We have to work hard to create a balance around food as well, in allowing them to have certain things. If it's a replacement for the cupcake, if it's a replacement for the fast food, like, yesterday I made chicken parm. I just made like chicken tenders coated in almond flour and nutritional yeast with some vegan cheese on top. And it tastes like McDonald's chicken nuggets. I mean, not really, but you know what I'm saying? It replaces that.
Yes,
It's
that's
not like
right.
I'm making a baked chicken. I'm making something that's like chicken nuggets. And so you replace what they crave and what they want so that they have a balance, and they're not immediately doing a 360 when they have control of their own lives and binging on the things that they never got to have as kids.
Right. There's always a healthy version. Just when I have to send, like when they have their birthdays for class, the cupcakes, we always do a gluten-free. We had a classmate last year that had severe nut allergies. So the cupcakes, I was like, oh my
What am
gosh,
I
can
going
I
to
eat
make? Yeah.
cupcakes? So I did end up using just a King Arthur's
Sure.
base for the cupcakes and let my daughter participate and help. And then we had to put, I feel like I use oat milk in it because we are
Okay.
generally using coconut, or obviously a coconut or maybe coconut almond blend or something.
Sure.
I've found an oat milk, so jumping through the hoops of the allergies, and this other
Yeah.
classmate that can't have any kind of nut exposure took
Yeah.
away any kind of almond or flour that we use. But I want to have, here's a healthy cupcake, or here's a healthy version of what we're doing. When I make, I rarely bake, but when I do, it's always around the holidays. We make, I've even used walnut flour for crust for our pies,
Yeah.
and maybe some coconut sugar or even xylitol as a
Yeah.
sweetener replacer,
Yeah.
so we always want to have something. If you're craving fried chicken,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
fried nuggets, yeah, we're going to have something that we've breaded in an
Yeah.
almond flour, and we want to make them see that it tastes really good,
Mhm.
right? Because we
Mhm.
eat with our eyes, but we also eat with our emotions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's more than just what we taste. But just have that, like, all right, this is our version of that.
There's
Absolutely.
nothing wrong with having a craving. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting what you want to eat. It's just a matter of having the tools and the resources to take what you want, make it taste how you want it. And that's what I do inside the Flare Free Pantry Makeover mini course. I take 10 years of experimenting with flare free ingredients, finding the best ones, and comprising it into a document for you. So you're not going out and spending hundreds of dollars on ingredients that taste like crap.
Yep.
That's the
Yep.
whole point. And I love that, you had mentioned earlier about your daughter going and like you're nervous about what she's going to do, like when she has the choice. But at the end of the day, the reason that you changed your life is because of the experience that you went through, and whether or not she stays on that path or creates a new path for herself will be based on entirely her experience, and that will be her choice at that point. But you as a parent have done your due diligence to learn better and to do better and to try to be better for your kids. And congratulations to you. It is not easy. So I
Not.
applaud you. I have never eaten a sardine in my life, or a sardine, and I have no intentions on doing it. Although you've made it sound very appealing. I might have to
They're
try
not
it
bad.
someday when I come over, but
Yes, yes. I will tell you our sardine mash. So we replaced a lot of mayo and stuff with
okay,
avocados,
yeah,
right? So you've mashed an avocado as a base of fat. So I will mash those together, kind of like a tuna salad. So
okay,
another version is a sardine you mash with about half an avocado. Give it an extra little olive oil so it doesn't get so thick and
sure.
gloppy. Salt, and then you can chop up celery and walnuts in it. And
Mm.
if you're putting your toe in the water, trying something new, again, nobody has
Are
to
we
do
doing
this.
some type of lime juice, lemon juice, something to give it some acid, or
I
is it
like lime. I'll do a
okay?
little bit of lime juice
Okay.
as well. Sometimes I don't always have celery in it, but I've got to
Okay.
have the crunch. So a
Okay.
walnut or almond or something in it
Okay.
to help it crunch.
Yeah.
Because tuna salad I've also made with tiny little diced tomatoes and diced
Mhm.
cucumbers in it.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
sardines, they hit differently.
Mm.
But there are some wonderful recipes where you grill them and then just top, like a Caesar salad, and that's
Yeah.
your protein.
Okay.
So there are good quality where you just eat them plain. My husband and I were in France back a couple of weeks ago, and every meal there was some sort of herring, sardine, octopus, lots of anchovies. I ate anchovies quite a bit while I was there. The town that we stay in, they have an anchovy festival. Like, I just
Oh,
thought it was
wow.
hilarious. So it's just not in our culture, but
Yeah.
it's like anything else.
Yeah.
And mackerel are incredible for you.
Mm,
Mackerel, if you decide to try them, you definitely want to get a little bit of a rinse on them,
mm.
because it's overwhelming when you open up that can.
Oh,
But
really?
mackerel, they are delicious. You got to have some sort of lemon to kind of offset, but
Sure.
lemon, a little bit of olive oil and salt.
Is
Um,
this like is it a bony fish? Are you taking fine bones out, or
I make,
are they removed?
I splurge on the boneless.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
The sardines that have the bones, you do get much higher calcium because the bones are edible
Sure.
and
You
safe.
can eat them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I usually just splurge and do.
Listen, I'm sitting here just thinking of all the sardine, like I can do like sardine mixed in, I think with like canned salmon or tuna in like a patty. I'm thinking of all sorts
Yes.
of recipes.
Yes, and I will do half and half tuna, like a tuna sardine mix. Yes,
Okay,
and we've
okay.
done, you've probably seen a similar recipe where you make the little muffin cups, but there was a sweet potato
Oh yeah,
involved.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
a sweet potato base with a tuna, and I did a tuna sardine like fish base and
Hmm.
made the little cups.
Yeah,
So
I love it.
listen, they're excellent protein. They are affordable. Of course, if you do bone in, those are cheaper.
Hmm.
But my kids, when they get bigger, if they don't want to eat them, fine. But they always are in my pantry.
I love
They're
that.
always there.
This is so enlightening. This is so amazing. So let's switch gears for a bit because you are a doctor, so we're very blessed to have you here and speaking with us today. So I'm not going to let this opportunity go by because I always like to sneak in some other, health related questions. But
Sure.
I think I had mentioned on Instagram before that I think there are like, at least for me, a set of instances that I'm constantly talking to my daughter about nutrition and food and diet that don't revolve around meal times. Like, say, for example, if she's constipated or she's passing little hard stools and they're not coming, because my daughter will literally look at her poop every day. I've trained her to do that. And so
Yes.
she'll call me in and go, Mom, you might want to look at this.
We
So
do that in our house too. Yes.
and so if she's constipated or she's dehydrated, like say so she's constipated, we'll talk about fiber and how she needs to eat more fiber. And then I'll be serving her some salad greens with breakfast the next day and some berries and all the things. If she has a headache randomly out of nowhere, we'll talk about the importance of drinking water and hydration and minerals, and we'll be putting the trace minerals in her water. And so what can you think of any other instances where we may need to bring up nutrition and diet and healthy eating for our kids that doesn't involve meal times?
Doesn't involve mealtime. So, yes to all of the above. We talk about poop quite a bit. Any sort of stomach ache, we of course
Okay.
discuss what you've had to eat and what you've eaten in the last couple of days. When they aren't sleeping well, we discuss, especially my daughter, she's been up having some bad dreams, and we time of day that you're eating, but then also, hey, this is why this type of food can make you not sleep as well. So we've used it to talk about diet whenever they're not sleeping well, and then behavior. Whenever I do have to discipline for bad behavior, and if
Mhm.
they're wound up or they're more aggressive, we go back to this is why, because for example, I didn't know this happened the first day of school, but my daughter came home and told me that they were given jitter juice the first day of school. I said, well,
Oh,
what?
I know what this is. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead. Mhm.
And she said, it's where the teacher mixes Sprite and something called Hawaiian Punch. Like, she was so excited. Like, any kind of, and Hawaiian Punch. I said, Hawaiian Punch, like a red juice. He goes,
It was
no, this
blue.
was green or green.
Oh,
This was green. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. So I said, okay, well, just like, you know, I use the example of the popsicles, because when we have popsicles are full of food dye. Anytime we go to the neighborhood pool, she's wanting popsicles that they have up at our little snack stand for kids. And I have had to talk to her about the things that make popsicles fun colors. And just like the popsicle that we don't want to eat because it wires you up. And I've never seen a child, I mean, within 15 minutes of eating, particularly red dye. I know you talk a lot about dyes and the different things, but the red dye, it stimulates her in a different way than even the blues and yellows. But I don't want them having food dyes. I don't want food dyes in their candy. They're everywhere, right? So I told her, I said, oh my gosh, remember when we had to have a timeout earlier and you guys have been so aggressive tonight? Like, I just thought we were burning off the day. I had no idea that would have sneaked in, because they're pretty good about, you know, it's the first day of school. You know, I knew there wouldn't be any parties or birthday things. I thought, surely no. But yeah, she said, well, we had something with Sprite. It was mixed with that and Hawaiian punch. And I was like, okay, here's why we don't do those things outside of the sugar, because you know it tastes very sweet. If they drink soda at our house, we drink Zevia sodas, or I'll do sparkly water and just a little bit of orange juice in it for them, sparkling water. So I walked her through to kind of help her backtrack to when we have this. A few hours later, our actions, you were in trouble a little bit more. You were ugly to your brother. We had to have some time out because of your attitude. So I've used that example. And then we're also getting into, she's only 7, but getting into fixing hair and understanding skin. So she knows that teenagers get bumps on their face. She's heard this, and bumps on their face, and then wanting to have, stuff in her hair. And so we talk about, hey, the foods that we put inside, that's what shows up on the outside, right? So we're using the skin interests and all things girly and makeup, which I'm just not ready to face yet, but any chance I can to plant the seed of, all right, you don't want bumps on your face? Here we go. So we've talked a lot about that just in the past few months, because she's getting older and becoming aware of that stuff.
No, I love it. I think these are so important, as we talked about earlier. Talk to your kids, tell them why you're doing things, but also in real time, in the moment, explaining to them what food does to our body so that they can see it. They're going to memorize that. So the next time the teacher brings out jitter juice or anything else with Hawaiian punch, she might go, I know I'm not supposed to have that. And I wish our teachers had a backup option for the kids that maybe don't even want that, or whatnot. Like, I wish we could. We accommodate kids with allergies very easily in school, but what about the kids whose parents don't want them to drink soda? Or my daughter's in aftercare now. She asked us, can I please go to aftercare? We were like, well, you don't really need aftercare, because we set up our schedules to where we can pick you up on time, but she's an only child and her friends are there. And so we're like, okay, we let her try it out. 2 days ago was her first day, and they have a giant jar of M&Ms that they give them if they behave. And then the first day, they're supposed to allow them to have snack. She takes a separate second snack to school with her in the morning for aftercare. Because the first day they offered her, I mean, she had her own snack, but they were giving the other kids, gosh, I can't remember. Oh, cookies. Cookies was a snack. Cookies is not a snack, guys. Cookies is a dessert. Cookies. And you know what? You know why they call it jitter juice? Not because you have the first day jitters, because you're going to be jittery after you drink
you're gonna be a little maniac.
Stomach at 9 o'clock in the morning.
That's right.
My goodness. So not only is this going to help our children understand their bodies and the food and what it does to them when they eat it, but it's also going to help us raise a generation of adults that understand that giving 9-year-olds and 7-year-olds jitter juice at 9 o'clock in the morning on an empty stomach is not okay.
Well, and this is kind of my, smart ass side of my personality, but my husband, that same day, we got all of this new update. We have a new principal. They have updated information about disciplinary action that will be taken if your child, acts a certain way. So it's this whole page of, self-control in the classroom and what's going to happen next. And if you have to get sent out to the principal's office, and if ultimately what would get you suspended, very detailed. And he's like, stop giving them jitter juice if you want them to behave. Just make the connection. If you wire them with M&Ms and sugar. And I know last year they had a science it's a science module about plants and planting things. And so they got to make a snack craft of Oreos as dirt, and then Twizzlers as the plant. And then, and so they're doing this hands-on craft that they get to eat afterward. And my daughter is like, I can't eat any of the things, but I get to have the thing, no, let's just plant an actual plant in dirt. There's so much that's you're just inundated with these.
Yes.
Everything revolves around junk food.
Yes.
And so I'm like, hey, I'm not going to feel bad if my kid acts out when you've pumped her full of sugar, when I've provided the healthy things, the only things that she needs to be eating throughout the day. If you swoop in and give her something else as a treat, I mean, you get what you get, right?
You're responsible for her behavior then.
Right. I did the best I could. I started our day with no sugar and breakfast.
Tons of protein. Yeah.
Right. The protein. We want to get them fat. We want to get fat in the meals. So we were pretty frustrated. And what happens next between my communication and the teacher, I don't know if I'm going to try to call. This teacher happens to also be new to the school this year. So, other teachers that they've had in the past have been really good about, we've got snack day coming up. They'll email me, please provide an alternative for your child so they don't feel left out. And even one of the kindergarten teachers that we had, she would say, I'm doing a food craft. She called them food crafts. I'm doing a food craft with these ingredients. Can your child have this or that? Is she allowed to have this? We'll have some gluten-free options, still full of sugar, but we're doing a food craft. Or can you send stuff for her? And the answer is always yes. And I appreciated her so much because she would back us up. And then my daughter would also, especially the daughter, the boy, again, he's much better about this stuff, but she would learn to say, okay, this is going to make my tummy hurt later, or I know I'm not going to feel good, so I'm not going to eat it now. But the jitter juice, she was just like, it was green and it was bubbly and it had Sprite in it. Like, girl, how do we don't buy Sprite, but here we are, and everybody else was doing it. And so I was very frustrated. And then that was given to them. It sounded like the last hour of the day. And then these kids are nuts by the time they ride on the bus, and there's discipline problems on the bus. And then when they get home. So it's just funny that my husband's like, oh, waving around the discipline form, like, it's on you. You're going to fill them full of marshmallows and M&Ms and, soda. Here we go. So
hard. But the good thing is your kids are on a good plan. And so a little bit of jitter juice isn't going to derail their health, right? And it was a learning moment for everybody, the teacher included. And maybe we can, send them with, like, I'm thinking now I might reach out to the teacher and just send her with a little something to have in the classroom for Ruby, because I don't want her to grow up feeling like she was the outcast and the kid that couldn't eat what everybody else was eating. I want her to have, a great childhood and look back on it fondly and not be like, my mom never let me eat that. But because I know I have a lot of adult clients that say, my mom never let us have this and that. And now I binge on it every time it's around. Right. And I don't want that for her. The other thing that came to my mind is, if you feel like if your kid is still eating the standard American diet and they can drink a whole can of soda and eat, freeze pops or what do you call them? Those popsicles that you were mentioning, and cupcakes and all of these things, and not have behavioral problems afterwards, it's because they've been having it long enough to where they don't notice. Whereas kids like your kids and my kids, where they don't have sugar all the time every day, we notice it very easily when they do. And so you might have to, once you get through a detox phase and transition your kids off sugar, you'll experience that as well. And you'll know, okay, this is why we have to stay on course, because my kids act a dang on mess when they have it.
Yes. And these kids, if that's just like adults, if that's their baseline, if your baseline every day is that your kids are having, soda, you start out with bowl of cereal,
Candy or cereal, yep, yep.
cereal.
Pancakes, waffles with
If
syrup.
that's their baseline, I love it when parents do get to make the connection when they do pull away a few things, just take baby steps, but you start to see an improvement in your child and a person that you like and you want to be around. It's so heartbreaking for me to watch other families and these moms that they're overwhelmed with their own health, but then watching them with their kids. Have one lady in particular that her child was a kindergartner last year. Her child, and she goes to a private school in Nashville, but her child was expelled in the second week of April at the end of the school year as a kindergartner for some bad choices she made in that moment of behavior. And I'm listening to this mom talk, and she was livid because they pay a lot of money for her to go to school there. It's the end of the year, but I at least had, 5 more weeks to figure out before we start the summer thing. What are we going to do? And I just had the thought that the teacher didn't kick her out because of this one isolated incident. This child, if they've reached that point with a 5.5, 6-year-old child that they're kicking her out, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. This was the last straw. We're not going to tolerate. This has been a pattern, of poor behavior, or aggressive, whatever. And there's so much we can do from a dietary standpoint to help them with who they're becoming. These food chemicals and these dyes and these fake foods, they put their nervous system in overdrive. They're amped up all the time when they're struggling with allergies, but the parent doesn't recognize it. Histamines are neurotransmitters that are excitatory. So just like if you're having an allergic reaction, do you want to itch? Do you want to have that runny nose, the runny eyes? How annoying that can be. But kids, they don't put those pieces together. Not all histamine responses present that way. And now you've got this kid that's just, of course they can't get control of their bodies. Of course they can't get control of just the aggression and maybe their attitude change because they're constantly in this excitatory, almost fight or flight stress mode. And they don't know how to, it's not up to them to express that, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just know, as we know as a parent, what we see on the outside. Then these poor kids, they're hurting on the inside. They are not healthy. They are sick, especially if they're in a constant allergic state. It is miserable. And just because they don't have a runny nose or a cough, the excitatory component is affecting their other cellular function, their heart rate, ringing in the ears. If you don't see a skin presentation, but they still itch, right? So these are the things that they're dealing with. It makes us angry as adults, right? I don't like when I feel like that. Yeah. So imagine this kid who's expected to just get up and go play the sports and sit still in class and do what we tell you to do, right? You can't expect that. Wow. So trying to make the connection for these parents, hey, maybe your child, it's hard words to hear, but your child would be more likable if we just put things in their body that they could actually use for fuel instead of their bodies constantly fighting against every bite that's gone in.
My mind is blown right now. That is a crazy, crazy connection I never thought to make. That's insane, about the histamine and the allergies and the constant fight or flight and wow. And imagine it's just trapped inside of a tiny little human,
a tiny little body. That's right.
Resources or tools or ability to do anything about it. Of course, they can act out.
Of course, it's got to come out somewhere. That's right. So when you mentioned earlier that we accommodate allergies, like the child of my, I think the daughter's class last year, the child, you weren't even allowed to have snacks in the classroom. First of all, I didn't know this, but there's a nut-free table. So the kids that are in this category, they have a removed place in the cafeteria. And then if you're in that classroom, you as the parent, you cannot provide a snack that involves any sort of nut. It cannot even say that the snack was made in a plant that processes nuts. They sent out all of these restrictions. And so it makes the snack time a little tough because, we can do some fresh fruit, but then if you need something to be sealed in a bag, like we send a lot of Larabars. I let the kids have Larabars as a prepackaged snack. Of course, those were off limits. I can't send the almond crackers as a gluten-free option. So it was tough. We had to accommodate this one child. And I asked her, I said, well, what happens at lunchtime? And she said that kid actually has to go to the office and eat, because even the nut-free table at school is not good enough in case there's air contamination, because this child is so sensitive.
Oh, wow.
So every other parent in the classroom is accommodating, everybody on the staff, and there are a group of kids. It wasn't just this one child,
Sure.
but so we're working very hard to accommodate. But then if I come in and say, hey, please don't give my kid mashed Oreos topped with a Twizzler, topped with marshmallows, and then some M&Ms to decorate, I would prefer you didn't. These are the reasons why. It's like, I'm this, I'm certainly the bad guy, right?
You're Looney Tunes. Yeah.
That's right. I don't mind being the bad guy, but it's just, it kills me that we can't make that connection, right? Just because my daughter isn't going to go into anaphylaxis from, the gluten or the corn or the inflammatory oils, it's still chipping away at her health. Right. So putting those
She's in
pieces
school
together
every day for the next 11 years, right?
right.
At
Right.
least. So, yeah.
Right. So it's a
important.
lot.
Yeah.
It is important.
Wow. This is amazing. Thank you so much for answering all these questions. I think I just have like one or two more. So, on a scale from 1 to 10, and I think I already know the answer, but 1 to 5, 5 being very important. How important do you think it is for parents with autoimmunity to try and introduce nutritious, whole, anti-inflammatory foods to their kids in an effort to prevent them from either developing autoimmunity or suffering from it greatly?
If 5 is the highest, it's absolutely 5. I mentioned earlier that I watched my own kids have their various reactions. Allergy responses are our body waving the flag. So when you're dealing with somebody, child or an adult, that's constantly in an allergic or reactive state, right, that their whole body is paying a price, these are the red flags that come up. Your body's trying desperately to tell you, hey, something's not right. Something doesn't belong here. These things, these are our messengers before the switch flips to autoimmune. Wherever your body's paying the highest price. So it could be autoimmune thyroid, it could be joint, the rheumatoid conditions, allergies and histamine responses. That is what your body is. That's those communicating red flags. So when I see a child covered head to toe in bleeding eczema, right? Bleeding eczema, when they get older, bleeding eczema, it almost always goes with some sort of lung respiratory condition. And then by the time they become adults and they can get deeper testing done or medical intervention, we see that, they are developing these horrible long-term lung disease, any type of sclerosing, sarcoidosis, these conditions that now you've got this permanent inflammatory scar tissue set up in the lungs. You see it on the skin, different changes in the skin. When you see people with that very rough looking skin, if it's not red like psoriasis or eczema typically presents, it eventually just kind of becomes rough and looks like leather, right? I've had patients that come in, they're like, well, my toes they're the same color, but they've looked like leather, my whole life. And those are the signs. These are the things that your body is inflamed and crying out, and your histamines will flare. Your immune cells will flare to warn you. But eventually, now the switch is flipped, and these immune cells, they can't get out of the flare. Then that's what autoimmune disease is, right? So once we flip the switch, because you've triggered and you've triggered and you've triggered without stopping the offense, right? Now we stay here. And now it's much more difficult to go backwards and heal. Whereas if you just listen sooner, right? Because you've probably heard before that kids can be allergic to something as a kid, and then they grow out of their allergies, right? It's not growing out, it's adaptation and that immune system. And when the immune system fails to adapt because you've just thrown junk your way, either your environment you're living in, things that you're eating, toxicity is all around you, the body can no longer adapt. And that's ultimately what autoimmune disease is now it can no longer adapt. And then when you stay in that unhealthy, inflamed state, what's after autoimmune disease is cancer, right? That's the progression. So allergies in kids, if I get a chance, if I'm treating the mom, and she's the pioneer of her home, and we want to talk to her about how to get her kids healthier, or if I get the privilege to treat the child, I feel like I have to rip every Band-Aid as gently as possible, because I know what's coming next for this kid. The amount of allergies and responses, I was that kid that was always allergy and overweight and miserable. Like, I shouldn't have the problems of a 40-year-old woman whenever I'm 8, And so what do you think is going to happen whenever I reach my teen years and then adult years, when I'm supposed to function in society and not be, taken care of by parents anymore, right?
Right.
So it's so important. And any woman that walks in with an autoimmune diagnosis, great, what are we doing with your kids? I'm always asking and planting the seeds, even if the child's not my patient. Why that person? You need to be on guard, diligent for your kiddo.
Wow. So important. Oh my goodness. Wow. Thank you so much for letting me ask you all these important questions. And thank you so much for sharing all of your, you know, family life with us. I know these are intimate topics, so I really appreciate you bringing us in and letting us know how you feed your kids, why it's important, all of the things. It is so special that we get to hear this message. So thank you so much. And thank everybody for joining us for another episode of Edible RX. It has been such a pleasure. If you are interested in taking this a step further and learning how to stock your pantry with anti-inflammatory ingredients that will help you make all of your favorite meals flare-free, including your kids' favorite meals. We're going to talk about chicken nugget replacement, mac and cheese, fruit snacks, juice boxes, all the things. Check out my upcoming free live virtual workshop. It's the Back to School Pantry Refresh on August 19th at 2 p.m. You can sign up at the link in the show notes, and definitely follow Dr. Greer on online at Music City Health
Center
Yes.
there. And then Dr. Greer, I think it's just that on Instagram. I have my own Instagram, and then Music City Health Center. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. And so
I will link all of the links down below in the show notes. You guys can go click and follow and reach out to her. You do telehealth services, is that right?
yes, telehealth, we offer that for remote patients. So we've got them all over the area. I've got my pack of people down in Florida and Indiana. We've got lots of Kentucky, neighboring state, and still my Carolinas folks, whenever I moved here, that, came with me. So yes,
So
telehealth.
all ages and stages, she's looking to add to the pack. If you are in Tennessee, if you are in Middle Tennessee in Hendersonville, and you want to stop by and see her beautiful face and sit down with her in person, you can. But if you want to reach out virtually, she has those services as well. So thank you so much. Did you want to say anything else before we leave?
I just, if you guys are considering reaching out for Laura's services, just know that every bite of her food I have put in my mouth is amazing. At the women's event, I still tell this story whenever I talk about you. She brought out this dessert and I got seconds. It was just incredible. So, part of, my mission and hers, this is a lifestyle change. We want to make this sustainable and doable, and help you as the woman or champion of your home, to be able to do this for your family. So I love her services. I wish that I could just have her for my family every day. Like, I love to cook, but I like what she does better. So if I could have access to her meals all the time, it would be incredible. So she really has put her years behind making the stuff taste good and make it fun, and make this to where, hey, this is not something that you dread. Like, we love living and eating this way because it's so tasty and our bodies are healthier for it. So,
Oh my gosh, it is
a little plug.
Yeah, well, thank you
And
for
I can't wait
that.
to the cooking again, because girl, y'all make that same thing. It was some little chocolate, whatever it was, do it again.
Oh, you know what? We're actually making that this Sunday inside the Meal Prep Brigade. So I started a 12-week group meal prep coaching program for folks that really need somebody to hold them accountable, to show up for themselves, to cook. And we're making that chocolate mousse this weekend. I'm so excited.
Okay.
Yes.
You guys are not going to be disappointed. Make the mousse, eat the mousse, make some backup mousse because you're going to want it later. Okay. Absolutely.
It's full of avocado and stevia. So you could literally eat it for breakfast if you wanted to. It's so good.
And I've made the mousse before. Like, I don't know what I'm missing. We'll talk offline, but I've made it before. Nothing that I've made tasted that good.
I'll give you
So I was
this.
like, we got to do this. We got to get this right, the right way. Cause I've got some ratio that's off and then nobody liked it.
I've seen pictures of people that try to do it like not following my recipe and it looks kind of this greenish brown. It has to be a dark brown chocolate color. It should not taste like avocado, really.
And it should not be grainy. Like I did something, something was amiss. So listen to her. She's got it down pat. And it's always an honor to chat. And thank you so much.
This is so wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Edible RX, the podcast that teaches autoimmune warriors to use anti-inflammatory food as medicine. Until next time, guys, eat your damn vegetables. Bye.